scholarships, everything.
Brian Banks asks Gibson for help in clearing his name.
She confessed that no assault had ever occurred, but she hesitated to come forward publicly, fearing she might have to return the settlement money she'd received after suing the Long Beach School District, a staggering $1.5 million.
I will go through with helping you, but all that money they gave me, I don't want to have to pay it back. All that, because that will take a long time.
Sit back and relax as we delve into some of the most sinister crime stories ever told. After every story, we'll remind you to like and subscribe, but be sure to watch until the end. And for more stories like these, be sure to subscribe to our other page, Morbid Law Stories. Link in the description. In the modern era, allegations of sexual assault carry immense weight, as they should. Survivors deserve justice, and their voices must be heard. But what happens when a false accusation is weaponized, leading to irreparable harm? The story of Nikki Yovino exemplifies this dark reality, a tale of deception, ruined lives, and the devastating impact of false claims on innocent people. In 2016, Nikki Yovino was an 18-year-old college student at Sacred Heart University in Fairfield, Connecticut.
College football player's life dreams shattered as he was falsely accused of rape.
By all accounts, she seemed to be living the typical freshman experience, attending classes, making friends, and enjoying the social scene. But everything changed at an off-campus party in October 2016. At the party, Yovino engaged in a sexual encounter with two football players in the bathroom. Both young men later claimed that the encounter was consensual.
That's right, Bill. Those two students were never arrested, never charged with any crime, but the accusation was serious enough, so much so they say they had to leave school.
However, days after the incident, Yovino reported to police and school authorities that she had been sexually assaulted by the two athletes. She alleged that they had forced her into the bathroom and assaulted her against her will. The accusations shocked the Sacred Heart community. The university and local law enforcement acted swiftly, as they should in cases of alleged sexual violence.
Her willingness to accept this plea deal reflects her accountability for what happened.
The two young men were immediately suspended from the football team and the school. Their names were splashed across headlines, and they faced not only the possibility of prison time, but also the permanent stain of being labeled as sexual predators.
It's bad enough that they were accused of such heinous behavior, though never arrested.
As authorities investigated Yovino's claims, they began to notice inconsistencies in her story. Initial forensic examinations showed no signs of physical trauma, and her timeline of events did not always align with witness statements or other evidence. The two accused athletes maintained their innocence, providing accounts that painted a very different picture from Yovino's allegations. They stated that the sexual encounter was entirely consensual, initiated by Yovino herself.
I have a sister and a mother and just people that I care about, and somebody to accuse me of that, it was life-changing because, you know, people don't look at you the same way.
Their claims were bolstered by text messages and witness testimony, suggesting that Yovino had willingly entered the bathroom with them. Despite this, the mere accusation had already wreaked havoc on their lives. The young men, who had promising futures as student athletes, were now ostracized and faced criminal charges. As the investigation continued, detectives became increasingly suspicious of Yovino's story. In February 2017, Yovino was questioned further by police. It was during this interrogation that she finally admitted she had fabricated the entire story.
Then Nikki Yovino drastically changed her story.
Yovino confessed that she made up the assault to gain sympathy from another student, a boy she liked and hoped to date. She feared that word of her consensual sexual encounter with the two football players would spread, potentially harming her chances with this boy. In an attempt to control the narrative and protect her reputation, Yovino falsely accused the two men of rape. The admission sent shockwaves through the community. False accusations of sexual assault are rare, but when they occur, they can have devastating consequences. In this case, two young men had their lives upended due to Yovino's selfish and deceitful actions.
And welcome back. A Long Island woman who falsely accused 2 football players of rape.
Once her deception was uncovered, Yovino was arrested and charged with several offenses, including falsely reporting an incident and tampering with or fabricating physical evidence. The charges highlighted the severity of her actions. Not only had she lied to law enforcement, but she had also manipulated the legal system and jeopardized the futures of 2 innocent men.
She was really interested in another person, a third guy, and she didn't want that guy to lose interest in her, so she claimed that this sex was a rape rather than...
In June 2018, Yovino pleaded guilty to charges of false reporting and interfering with police. During her sentencing, she expressed remorse for her actions, though the sincerity of her apology was widely questioned. The 2 young men, who had been publicly vilified, spoke of the lasting damage Yovino's false accusation had caused them. One of the victims addressed the court, detailing the emotional toll he had endured. He spoke of the shame, isolation, and mental anguish he suffered after being accused of such a heinous crime. The other young man shared similar sentiments, emphasizing how the accusation had derailed his life and tarnished his reputation. Ultimately, Yovino was sentenced to 1 year in prison, with 3 years of probation to follow. While her sentence was relatively light compared to the gravity of her crime, it marked a rare instance of someone being held accountable for making a false sexual assault allegation. For the 2 falsely accused athletes, the damage was already done. Although the criminal charges against them were dropped, they struggled to rebuild their lives. They had been forced to leave Sacred Heart University, and their dreams of playing college football were shattered. Even after their names were cleared, the stigma of being falsely accused of sexual assault lingered. False accusations carry a unique kind of devastation. In the court of public opinion, the accused often remain guilty even after being exonerated. For these 2 young men, the fallout extended beyond the immediate consequences of Yovino's lie. They lost educational opportunities, athletic careers, and a sense of security in their own community. The emotional scars left by the ordeal would take much longer to heal.
It's a very, very low false reporting rate for sexual assault.
It's sad because there are people who are raped and taken advantage of, and they can't speak out because they're scared to.
The Nikki Yovino case reignited debates about the delicate balance between believing survivors of sexual assault and protecting the rights of the accused. In recent years, movements like the Me Too movement have empowered survivors to come forward and seek justice. However, cases like Yovino's highlight the potential for abuse within the system. False accusations undermine the credibility of genuine survivors, making it harder for them to be believed. They also strain law enforcement resources, diverting attention away from real victims who need help. Moreover, false accusations can deter other victims from reporting their assaults, fearing they won't be taken seriously if their story doesn't hold up under scrutiny. Advocates for both survivors and the falsely accused agree that the justice system must strike a careful balance. Every report of sexual assault should be thoroughly investigated, with a presumption of innocence for the accused until proven otherwise. At the same time, survivors should feel empowered to come forward without fear of being dismissed or disbelieved. The Nikki Yovino story serves as a cautionary tale about the power of words and the far-reaching consequences of false allegations. It's a reminder that accusations of sexual assault must be taken seriously, but not at the expense of due process and fairness. The lives of both survivors and the accused hang in the balance, and the stakes could not be higher. For Yovino, her actions not only led to her own downfall, but also brought immense harm to others. Her case underscores the importance of honesty and accountability in matters of such grave importance. For the 2 young men she falsely accused, their journey to rebuild their lives continues. They are a testament to resilience in the face of injustice, though their story is a sobering example of how quickly one lie can spiral out of control. As society continues to grapple with issues of sexual violence and justice, the Yovino case will remain a significant point of reference. It's a story that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human behavior, the legal system, and the power of perception. Above all, it's a reminder that justice must serve all parties fairly, ensuring that neither survivors nor the falsely accused are left without a voice. Please like this video and share it out to your friends. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the page. Thanks for watching. Charles Scott Robinson holds the record for the longest prison sentence in U.S. history, 30,000 years. In 1994, Robinson was convicted in Oklahoma of 6 counts of child rape, crimes so heinous that the judge delivered a sentence of 5,000 years for each count to be served consecutively. Robinson's case shocked the nation due to the egregious nature of his crimes. His victims were children under the age of 10, and the evidence presented in court left no room for doubt. Prosecutors described how Robinson used his position of trust to manipulate and harm these vulnerable children. The lengthy sentence was intended not only as a punishment, but also as a message to society about the severity of such crimes. Despite the staggering length, Robinson's sentence was largely symbolic. He would never be eligible for parole or see the outside of a prison cell again. His case continues to stand out as an example of the U.S. justice system's response to unspeakable crimes against children. Alan Wayne McLaurin was sentenced to an astounding 21,250 years in Oklahoma for a series of violent crimes, including rape, robbery, and kidnapping. His crime spree, committed alongside his partner Darren Benelford Anderson, left several victims traumatized. In 1994, both men were convicted of their horrific acts. During their trial, victims provided harrowing testimony, detailing the violent assaults and the psychological torment they endured. Initially, Anderson received a 2,200-year sentence, but after a retrial, his punishment increased to over 11,000 years. McLaurin's longer sentence reflected his direct role in the most brutal aspects of the crimes. The extraordinary sentence ensured that McLaurin would never be released, emphasizing the court's stance on the severity of his actions. It also served to provide closure to the victims, knowing he would remain behind bars for life, and then some. This case remains one of the most extreme examples of lengthy sentencing in U.S. history. Dudley Wayne Kaiser was sentenced to 10,000 years in prison for the 1976 murder of his wife, along with 2 life sentences for the killings of his mother-in-law and a college student. His crime was brutal, shocking the small Alabama community where it occurred. Kaiser murdered his estranged wife, Diane, on Halloween night. After shooting her, he turned his weapon on her mother and a young student who happened to be at the home. The sheer cold-bloodedness of the crime left the community reeling. During the trial, prosecutors painted Kaiser as a man consumed by rage and jealousy, unwilling to let his wife move on. The presiding judge handed down the maximum penalties, including the extraordinary 10,000-year sentence for his wife's murder, ensuring that Kaiser would never again walk free. This sentence reflected both the horror of his crimes and the court's desire to send a clear message. Such heinous acts would be met with the harshest punishment possible. James Holmes received 12 consecutive life sentences, plus 3,318 years for the 2012 mass shooting in Aurora, Colorado.
In Colorado, a mother is trying to save the life of her son. The mother of James Holmes, convicted of murdering 12 people in an Aurora movie theater, testified today in the sentencing phase of his trial.
This tragic event took place during a midnight screening of The Dark Knight Rises, leaving 12 dead and 70 injured.
murder trial heard more from the defendant in his videotaped interview with a court-appointed psychiatrist. Holmes had pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity in the Colorado movie theater massacre that left 12 people dead and 70 injured.
Holmes, armed with multiple firearms, entered the packed theater and opened fire without warning.
Holmes's Aurora apartment were detonated the day after the shooting.
His actions were calculated, as he had previously booby-trapped his apartment to cause further harm to responders.
Movie theater shooting suspect James Holmes looked dazed in court. He sat with a blank stare multiple times during the 25-minute hearing, that stare captured in this sketch.
His arrest was swift, and during his trial, the defense argued that Holmes suffered from severe mental illness. However, prosecutors highlighted the premeditated nature of the attack. The jury ultimately rejected the insanity defense.
The judge gave the prosecution permission to start forensic testing of weapons believed to be used in the theater shooting. This footage from Air Tracker 7, the morning of the shooting, shows one weapon on the roof of the car believed to be driven by Holmes.
And Holmes was spared the death penalty, but sentenced to life without parole.
Death penalty decision has to be made within 60 days of the arraignment. Okay. So it is months down the line still.
The additional 3,318 years were for attempted murders and explosives charges, symbolizing the gravity of the devastation he caused.
I would have been crawling on all fours to get to him. He's never said that he wanted to kill people. She didn't tell me.
Holmes's case remains one of the darkest chapters in U.S. history. Highlighting the devastating impact of mass shootings.
In a poll out this week, Jane, 63% say they believe Holmes should be executed.
Sholem Weiss received one of the longest sentences for white-collar crime in U.S. history. $845 years in federal prison. His crimes revolved around a massive insurance fraud scheme that led to the collapse of the National Heritage Life Insurance Company in the 1990s.
On February 15, 2000, the Middle District Court of Florida sentenced Weiss to 845 years in prison for racketeering, wire fraud, money laundering, and the interstate transportation of stolen funds.
Weiss and his accomplices defrauded the company of over $450 million, leaving thousands of policyholders, many of them elderly, without their life savings. The scale of the operation was staggering, involving complex financial manipulations and offshore accounts. After his conviction, Weiss fled the U.S., but he was eventually captured in Austria and extradited back to face justice. The court handed down the 845-year sentence to reflect the immense financial and emotional harm inflicted on the victims. Weiss's story is a cautionary tale about the devastating consequences of corporate greed and the lengths to which the justice system will go to hold perpetrators accountable. If you would like to see more morbid law stories, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching. In early 2000s, Brian Banks was riding high. He was a star linebacker at Polytechnic High School in Long Beach, California. His abilities attracted the attention of college scouts nationwide, and he received multiple offers from prestigious programs, including a verbal commitment from the University of Southern California, USC. He was on track for a bright future, seemingly destined for the NFL. But in 2002, when Banks was only 16, his life took a dark and unexpected turn. During the summer of his junior year, a fellow student named Juanetta Gibson accused Brian of kidnapping and raping her on school grounds. The accusation stunned everyone who knew Brian and shattered his dreams almost instantly. With a potential life sentence looming over him, Brian was thrust into a world of courtrooms and lawyers, far from the football fields and college dreams he'd envisioned. Despite the lack of physical evidence and several inconsistencies in Gibson's account, the legal system's pressure on Brian was immense. His lawyer advised him to take a plea deal, fearing that a young black man might not receive a fair trial.
Although Banks insisted it was consensual and there was no sex, he told KCBS TV that his defense attorney at the time gave him a choice: plead no contest to rape or risk a trial that could send him to prison for life.
When you go into that courtroom, the jury is going to see a big black teenager
and you're automatically going to be assumed guilty. Those are her exact words.
The plea deal meant avoiding a potential life sentence, but at a terrible cost. He would spend over 5 years in prison and face a lifetime of parole, branded as a sex offender. Torn between the risk of life in prison or a reduced sentence, Brian took the plea deal, not fully understanding the gravity of that decision.
He took the deal, went to prison, and had to register as a sex offender. He thought that was the end of it.
Banks spent 5 long years in prison, during which time he wrestled with anger, confusion, and frustration. He'd gone from a celebrated athlete to an inmate, all because of a crime he didn't commit. After serving his sentence, he was released on parole but was required to wear a GPS tracking device and register as a sex offender, which limited his freedom and restricted his ability to find work or rebuild his life. But through it all, Brian maintained a steadfast belief in his innocence and in his right to clear his name. He spent his days educating himself on the legal system and contemplating ways to overturn his conviction. Then, in a twist that no one could have predicted, his life took another unexpected turn. In 2011, nearly a decade after the accusation, Brian received a Facebook message from none other than Juanetta Gibson, the woman who had falsely accused him. She wanted to let bygones be bygones and reconnect.
A friend request on Facebook from his accuser, Juanetta Gibson.
I remember closing the laptop just like real quick and just like thinking like, what did I just see?
Though shocked, Brian saw this as a potential opportunity to finally prove his innocence. He met with Gibson twice, and during their conversations, she admitted that she had lied about the rape.
The private eye suggested Banks first invite Gibson to his office for a friendly chat about their past. Brian Banks asks Gibson for help in clearing his name.
She confessed that no assault had ever occurred, but she hesitated to come forward publicly, fearing she might have to return the settlement money she'd received after suing the Long Beach School District, a staggering $1.5 million.
I will go through with helping you, but all that money they gave us, gave me, I don't want to have to pay it back all that, because that will take a long time.
Now comes the hard part. Banks had to convince Gibson to come back the next day and talk to the private eye who was helping free him.
Hey, buddy.
The mood in the room was light, but investigator Parrish's questioning got heavy.
When did you lose your virginity? Was it after him, before him?
After.
Now the big question.
Did he rape you?
No, he did not rape.
Did he kidnap you?
No.
With this new information, Banks turned to the California Innocence Project, an organization dedicated to helping wrongfully convicted individuals. The Innocence Project took on his case, working tirelessly to gather evidence and push for his exoneration. In 2012, their efforts paid off.
It was the key evidence that Banks' lawyers from the California Innocence Project needed to go back to court, and that undercover video got Brian Banks' rape conviction thrown out.
Petition is granted.
The end of Brian Banks' ordeal was marked by tears after a judge threw out the rape charge that had sent him to prison for more than 5 years.
The courts overturned Banks' conviction, fully exonerating him and finally restoring his name. For Brian, it was a bittersweet victory. While he was now free from the chains of his wrongful conviction, he had lost a decade of his life, critical years that could have been spent building his career and future.
I may not ever get the answers as to why I was supposed to go through what I went through, but I know that I'm here today and I remain unbroken.
After his exoneration, Banks was determined to resurrect his dream of playing professional football, despite being out of the game for years. At 27, he knew he was older than most rookies and had been away from the sport for a long time, but he was ready to put in the work. He began training rigorously, and his story caught the attention of several NFL teams, each inspired by his resilience and dedication. His first big break came when he was invited to participate in the Seattle Seahawks minicamp. Although he didn't make the roster, he continued pushing forward. In 2013, the Atlanta Falcons signed Brian Banks, giving him a shot to compete in the NFL. Though his time with the Falcons was brief, this moment symbolized a long-awaited victory for Brian. He had defied the odds, going from a wrongfully convicted felon to an NFL player, a feat that few could ever imagine. After Brian's exoneration, Juanetta Gibson faced no criminal charges for her false accusations, largely due to her reluctance to testify under oath and because the statute of limitations had passed. However, her civil settlement with the Long Beach School District became a matter of contention. In 2013, the district filed a lawsuit against Gibson, seeking repayment of the $1.5 million settlement.
Now the district wants its money back. It's suing her for the $750,000 and more than $1 million in damages. A district spokesman says, quote, "Our school district takes seriously our obligation to be a good steward of public funds. It's important to convey that our school board will take action to recoup any losses if someone attempts to defraud our schools of much-needed resources."
All the heartache and the problems they have to go through and people looking at them in the wrong way, like they did something wrong when they didn't. So you lied. Give the money back. There's a lot of stuff that we could do with that. Scholarships that could go to high school kids, that don't have the money to go to college.
By 2015, a court ordered her to repay the money, ruling that her false claims had caused significant damage. While the outcome brought some semblance of justice, it was clear that the years of hardship and trauma Banks endured could never be fully compensated. For Brian, though, the focus was on moving forward and using his voice to prevent future injustices. After his brief time in the NFL, Banks transitioned into a new role, one of an advocate and public speaker. He joined forces with the California Innocence Project and began traveling across the country, sharing his story to inspire others and raise awareness about wrongful convictions. He became a powerful voice for criminal justice reform, working to ensure that what happened to him doesn't happen to others. Brian Banks' story is one of tragedy, resilience, and ultimate redemption. Wrongfully accused and robbed of nearly a decade of his life, he still rose above his circumstances, fulfilling his dream to play in the NFL and becoming a powerful advocate for criminal justice reform. His journey serves as a reminder of the flaws in the justice system and the strength of the human spirit to overcome even the darkest of times. Thank you for watching, and if you're as inspired by Brian's story as we are, please like, subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. In March 1984, Gary Plauché became a symbol of vigilante justice when he shot and killed Jeff Doucet, the man who kidnapped and sexually abused his 11-year-old son, Jody. The incident unfolded in the Baton Rouge Metropolitan Airport as Doucet, under police escort, was being returned from California after his capture.
Baton Rouge, Louisiana. By all accounts, a devoted father. He was emotionally devastated.
Plauché, disguised in a baseball cap and sunglasses, waited near the arrival area. As Doucet walked by, Plauché pulled out a concealed handgun and shot him in the head at point-blank range, killing him instantly. The event was broadcast live on local television, capturing the nation's attention.
My camera raced it up to get a close-up shot of him. So I got a close-up shot, and as he got...
Plauché's actions sparked widespread debate. While some condemned his vigilante approach, others empathized with a father pushed to the brink.
We didn't know what to do. You just feel helpless.
In court, Plauché was charged with manslaughter but avoided prison time. He received a 7-year suspended sentence, 5 years of probation, and 300 hours of community service. The leniency reflected the court's recognition of his emotional torment and Doucet's heinous crimes. To this day, Plauché's act is often cited as a stark reminder of the lengths to which a parent might go when faced with the trauma of their child's suffering. His son, Jody, later forgave his father and went on to advocate for victims of abuse. Sharing his story in the book, Why, Gary, Why? The very question reporters shouted as Plauché pulled the trigger.
Why, Gary, why? And to this day, it stands out in my mind, the shooter, Gary Plauché, says, if it had been your child, you would have done the same thing too.
Michael Madison was a convicted serial killer responsible for the brutal murders of 3 young women in Cleveland, Ohio.
An 18-year-old is now accused of stabbing a 62-year-old woman and 3 kids on Cleveland's east side.
During his 2016 sentencing, emotions ran high as families of the victims delivered their impact statements.
Was never any trouble.
Timothy Galaski says he prayed when he first heard the news, shocked because he says Madison never bothered anyone.
Van Terry, the father of Sherelda Terry, approached the podium, hoping to convey the depth of his pain. But when Terry saw Madison smirking, he could no longer contain his rage. Without warning, Terry leaped across the courtroom table, reaching Madison and attempting to strike him.
Just to show you that the killer continues to smile, this man is sentenced to death for killing 3 people.
Court officers quickly intervened, dragging Terry away, but not before he managed to get a few hits in. The courtroom erupted into chaos as other family members screamed and cried.
In case you missed it, I just want to...
The dramatic scene underscored the intense emotional weight of the trial, where Madison faced the death penalty. For many, Terry's actions were understandable. A visceral response to the unimaginable loss and Madison's apparent lack of remorse.
Time, his lawyers blaming childhood abuse by the hands of his mother Diane.
Though Terry faced no serious legal repercussions for the outburst, the incident became a defining moment of the trial. It highlighted the profound impact of violent crimes on the victims' families and the fragile balance between justice and raw human emotion.
It just makes you wonder, what was he thinking and what was the motive and what was his mindset and why.
Madison ultimately received a death sentence, but the memory of Terry's leap remains a powerful symbol of a father's grief boiling over into action. Matthew Komrowski, a Rhode Island man, was at the center of a courtroom attack following his arrest for the 2011 murder of his fiancée, Shirley Donnelly.
We've learned the Facebook page was discovered by the murder victim's son.
It's like any other Facebook page. In one post, Matthew Komrowski appears to be telling the world he's bored.
Authorities alleged that Komrowski killed Donnelly and set her apartment on fire to destroy evidence.
It was more than that, his rap sheet. It was arson, domestic, attempted murder, assault. It went on and on and on.
While confined to a mental health facility due to incompetency rulings, Komrowski's case stirred outrage.
It's just further violating. They get to see more, an update, a fast-forward image of this person that they're trying to deal with and block out of their mind and go on with their lives.
During one court appearance, tensions reached a boiling point when a member of Donnelly's family managed to breach security and physically attack Komrowski.
It was quite a scene. After a heated exchange, court officers had to physically restrain a visitor inside the courtroom during the arraignment of the Cranston murder suspect.
The confrontation, though quickly subdued, highlighted the family's grief and frustration over years of legal delays. The incident, coupled with Komrowski's controversial behavior, such as posting explicit content online from within the hospital, fueled public outrage.
The man charged with last week's Cranston murder of his 38-year-old girlfriend, Shirley Donnelly, and then setting a fire to cover it up.
Komrowski's eventual return to court after being declared competent reignited calls for justice. The attack underscored the raw emotions that victims' families endure.
We are told by the victim's family that he had a lengthy criminal record and he had only been let out of jail 2 days prior to Donnelly's murder.
As they navigate a slow and often painful judicial process. In Syracuse, New York, Wendell McNeil stood before the court in 2023 to be sentenced for manslaughter. He had pleaded guilty to fatally stabbing a man, leaving the victim's family devastated. As McNeil began to apologize during sentencing, 2 men, relatives of the victim, charged at him, managing to land several blows before court officers intervened. The altercation was swift but impactful, leaving the courtroom in disarray. McNeil was ultimately restrained, and the sentencing resumed under heightened security. The attack underscored the family's pain, highlighting the intense emotional toll that violent crimes have on loved ones. Despite the disruption, the judge acknowledged the family's grief while urging for order and justice through lawful means. For more morbid law stories, please like this video and share it out to your friends. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the page. Thanks for watching. In 1996, Richard Rosario was a 20-year-old father living in the Bronx, New York, when his life was turned upside down. He was arrested and charged with the murder of Jorge Collazo, a man who had been shot and killed in broad daylight. The murder shocked the local community, and police were under immense pressure to solve the case quickly. Unfortunately for Rosario, he became their target, even though he was hundreds of miles away in Florida at the time of the crime. The case against Rosario hinged almost entirely on the testimony of two eyewitnesses. Both claimed they had seen him flee the scene after the shooting. However, their identifications were based on brief and stressful encounters, raising serious questions about their reliability. Compounding the issue, police did not conduct a thorough investigation. They failed to follow up on Rosario's alibi, which would have cleared him from the start. Rosario had an airtight alibi. He was in Deltona, Florida, on the day of the murder. 13 people, including friends and acquaintances, were willing to testify that they had seen him in Florida. Despite this, his defense attorney failed to contact most of these witnesses or present their testimonies effectively in court.
My son was born on June 20th, 1996, and they're claiming that Richard killed someone on June 19th, 1996, which that's physically impossible because he was in my house when we were leaving for my wife to go to the hospital.
The jury never heard from the majority of them, and the ones who did testify were not given the attention they deserved. This critical failure of his defense left Rosario vulnerable to a wrongful conviction. During his trial, Rosario consistently maintained his innocence, but the system seemed stacked against him. The prosecution relied heavily on the eyewitness accounts, and without the support of his alibi witnesses, Rosario's defense was weak. After deliberating, the jury found him guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, even though no physical evidence linked him to the crime and his alibi was never thoroughly explored. Rosario entered prison a broken man, but he never gave up hope. He spent the next 2 decades fighting to prove his innocence. From behind bars, he wrote countless letters to legal organizations, journalists, and innocence projects, hoping someone would take notice of his case. Despite years of rejection, Rosario's determination never wavered. In 2015, Rosario's story finally gained traction when NBC's Dateline featured his case.
Here in New York today, a stunning development in a murder case NBC News has been following for nearly 3 years. A man.
The investigative report drew national attention, highlighting the serious flaws in his trial. Around the same time, the Exoneration Initiative, a non-profit organization dedicated to investigating wrongful convictions, took up his case. They uncovered significant evidence of ineffective legal counsel, including the failure to call crucial alibi witnesses.
The Bronx DA has recently sent investigators to Florida to speak with Rosario's alibi witnesses.
With the new evidence in hand, the Exoneration Initiative petitioned the court to review Rosario's case. In March 2016, after serving 20 long years in prison, a judge vacated his conviction, ruling that he had not received a fair trial. Rosario was released from prison, finally able to embrace his family and begin the process of rebuilding his life.
The courtroom, shackled.
Your Honor, I was going to ask if the cuffs can be taken off of him.
The cuffs are quickly removed. An attorney from Bronx DA Darcel Clark's office tells the judge they now believe Richard Rosario did not receive a fair trial.
We concede that the defendant did not receive effective assistance of counsel. We consent to the release of the defendant on his own recognizance.
While Rosario's exoneration was a major victory, it was also bittersweet. He had lost 2 decades of his life, years that could have been spent raising his children, pursuing a career, and living freely. The emotional toll on his family was immense. His children grew up without their father, and his parents aged without seeing their son free. But Rosario's fight for justice didn't end with his release.
Today, in a Bronx courtroom, as prosecutors tried to right the wrong and formally dismiss the murder case against him, Rosario did the unthinkable. He asked for the murder case against him to remain open until his name is cleared.
The public should know the truth. The families of the victims should have that clarity and that peace of mind that, you know, a murderer is not in the street and that their son received the justice that he deserved.
In 2018, he filed a civil lawsuit against the city of New York and several police officers, accusing them of misconduct and negligence. He argued that the police had rushed to judgment, ignored crucial evidence, and failed to properly investigate his alibi. His case highlighted systemic issues in the justice system, including the dangers of eyewitness misidentification and inadequate defense.
Well, before I took office, I met with the Exoneration Initiative about Mr. Rosario. And it came to my attention that they had an appeal and our answer was due. So before I did anything else on Mr. Rosario's case, I thought it was necessary to just do the preliminary steps of investigating the case or the allegations. He had an alibi defense that was never investigated.
In 2022, a jury awarded Rosario $5 million in damages, recognizing the severe harm caused by his wrongful conviction. This financial settlement, while significant, could never truly compensate for the lost years and the emotional trauma he endured. In 2023, a court further awarded his legal team $4 million in fees, underscoring the complexity and significance of the case. Rosario used his platform to advocate for criminal justice reform, becoming a vocal critic of the system that had failed him. He spoke at events, participated in panel discussions, and worked with organizations dedicated to preventing wrongful convictions.
If I had to spend every day of my life in prison to prove my innocence, I would have been prepared to do that.
His story served as a powerful reminder of the importance of thorough investigations, competent legal representation, and accountability within the justice system. Despite the hardships, Rosario focused on moving forward. He reconnected with his family, built a new life, and dedicated himself to helping others who had been wrongfully convicted. His resilience and determination inspired many, proving that even in the face of profound injustice, it is possible to find hope and redemption. Richard Rosario's story is one of heartbreak, resilience, and ultimately justice. Wrongfully convicted and robbed of 2 decades of his life, he emerged stronger, using his experience to shed light on the flaws in the criminal justice system. His journey serves as a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure and the importance of fighting for truth and accountability. So what do you think about this case? Do you believe justice was truly served? Did the award of $5 million make up for Rosario's 20 years lost to incarceration? And what should society do to make sure that these kinds of injustices don't happen again? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video or found this story eye-opening, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.